Hey everyone, today we're here with Bernard Huang, and Bernard and I used to work at 500 together. He's on the distro team. He also is a founder of MUSHI Labs, which is a SEO consulting firm focused a lot on programmatic SEO, which is something that he'll also be talking about today. Before that, he was a growth hacker at 42 Floor. So really high level of expertise in SEO. We're lucky to have him here. Thanks for joining us, Bernard.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dom. So today I'm going to be talking about the basics of thinking about SEO from a startup level. And I've prepared this presentation, which basically goes over the state of SEO in 2016, because it's changed, right? It's a changing landscape of spammers versus machine learning versus, spammers getting a lot smarter and then machine learning getting a lot smarter. So I basically want to cover the reasons why you would want to, do SEO. At what stage does it make sense? And of course, like when you're getting started, what are the relevant accounts that you would want to set up? How should you think about, researching your keywords? And, what are the top content considerations? And what's Google really focusing on right now? So let's jump in. All right, so SEO 101. I'm Bernard. Dom gave an excellent introduction. I am a distro hacker at 500. I do SEO at my own consultancy called MUSHI Labs. So what we're covering, SEO in 2016, should you SEO as a startup? How to set up the relevant tooling and accounts for your SEO, keyword research, on-site content considerations, on-site technical considerations, and off-site hacks. So moving ahead, SEO in 2016. The evolution of SEO kind of started, in early 2000 when Google first rolled out. And back in those days, it was about how many links you had, how many anchor text you would stuff with keywords and, putting a meta tag that said keywords, and then you would put that in. 10 years later, it's not about the quantity of links, but more of the authority. A link from the New York Times is going to be worth a lot more than a link from Joe Schmo's blog, right? And what's the relevance of that link? If it's coming from, Nature, the science magazine, and it's linking to, your company, and you're a green startup technology company, that's going to be a lot more relevant than TechCrunch or Mashable, right? And then it's about the content and the keywords that are being actually used in the content. But in 2016, it's no longer really as much about the links as it is quality content and kind of machine learning. And what do I mean by quality content and machine learning? I think that Google has enough computing power and is smart enough to basically measure user engagement based on what's happening in the search engine results pages, right? So for example, you Google food delivery in San Francisco and you get, the top 10 results. Google tries each result or each piece of content as rank number 1, rank number 2, rank number 3, and it grades how long did someone spend if they clicked on the first result and how many people clicked on that result, and that's the click-through rate. So they're measuring okay, the dwell time, how long they stayed before moving back to the search engine, and then from there are they actually are they satisfied with that piece of content? Do they search something else? Do they conclude their search journey, or do they click on the second result? And how long do they stay there, right? So those things are really being taken into consideration for what's called the head terms. And the head terms are basically terms that get over 1,000 or 2,000 monthly searches per month, because Google is able to then sample enough of that data to draw statistical significance on, okay, like food delivery in San Francisco, Grubhub should be number one, right? Because it has the highest click-through rate and people who click on it spend the most amount of time on there. Quality content is basically the notion of comprehensive content, which in Google's eyes, if you're writing, a piece of content around Bill Clinton, like who is Bill Clinton, then their knowledge graph shows that whenever Bill Clinton is mentioned, Hillary Clinton is also mentioned, and same with Al Gore and Yale University, University of Arkansas, White House, right? And if you write a piece of content that is talking about Bill Clinton, then it wouldn't be relevant if those keywords that should be related to Bill Clinton don't exist on your site, right? So site-wide quality is also important, right? If you have one piece of really great content and 99 pieces of like cookie cutter, one sentence things, that overall affects how Google looks at your website. And of course, links are still significant, but Google has been trying very hard to move away from links. And their algorithms are very smart at detecting unnatural linking behavior. So it's still a significant part of the algorithm, but it's moving farther and farther away. So the second question, or the primary question that you should consider when you're thinking about SEO for your startup or your project that you're working on, is should you invest in SEO? Is there any actual search volume for your product, app, or service, right? That's something that's important. Something else that's important to take into consideration is that SEO takes a long time in startup time. We're usually talking 3 to 6 months of drawing a correlation upon the content that you published and gaining search traffic from it. And the last thing is that SEO is not guaranteed, right? Just because you publish a piece of content around, Internet of Things like biometrics or something, that does not mean that Google or you deserve to rank on Google. So is there search volume for what you're searching for, right? If you're treading into the new industry or a new kind of application of something like a sock warming hardware piece, people don't search for that thing. It's tons of people will search for cats. Some people search for cat meme generator, but if you're launching a startup or a project that's on-demand cat delivery service and you think that that's gonna be the next big thing, doing SEO on on-demand cat delivery service doesn't actually net you anything. SEO takes a long time, right? Especially in startup time. So this is one of the projects that I did back in 2014. It's still live, but we began really investing in content and links and SEO in April of 2014. And you can see that we started with 0. This is filtered by Google Organic. And by September, which is 5 months from now, or 5 months from when we invested in SEO, we were getting less than 1,500 sessions. So it's a long process and it's expensive. And SEO isn't guaranteed, right? Paid advertising is guaranteed. You put in, whatever you put into Facebook or AdWords, and the traffic is going to come. But SEO, who knows? You really have to do a good job and understand why your piece of content would rank or do better than any other piece of content. So should you SEO? In my opinion, you should really only invest in SEO when you're post product market fit, right? You don't want to be investing in SEO and basically pivoting your product or service 3 months later, right? If you start investing in it and you're like, oh crap, like we're actually going to be selling something else, then all of that effort was pretty much wasted, right? You should also only SEO if you know what keywords you'd like to rank for. And also, like, you have competitors who are ranking for things on Google that you'd like to rank, right? I think that that's pretty important to know before considering investing in SEO. So that being said, let's move into how to implement your SEO. So the tools and the accounts that are relevant are Google Search Console, Google My Business, and Bing Webmaster Tools. So why Google Search Console? Google Search Console is basically it gives you all of the data behind what's actually happening in search. If you use Google Analytics as kind of your baseline traffic tracker, Search Console gives you like how the DNS is performing, how many errors you're getting, what is actually the search queries that are driving traffic to your website. Because in Google Analytics, those things are not provided, right? You can also see sitemaps and how much of your website Google has indexed. So setting up your Search Console is pretty easy. You basically go Google Search Console, and then you add your website. You can also add your Android app because Google is getting, it's starting to index like Android like content. So, adding all of the variations of your website is pretty important because you can specify, like, do you have a www? Do you not have a www? Google treats each of these properties as separate domains. And it's important that you tell Google that I'm the owner of all of these properties. And then you can set how you want your domain to show up in Google, right? Do you want the www because your site is hosted on Heroku, or do you not? Right? And that's important because one variation of your website should be consistent across all of like Google. Kind of having a valid sitemap is also important. And that's why, you should set up your Search Console, because you can submit a sitemap to Google telling it, hey, these are all of the pages that exist on my website. And Google will actually give you indexation percentages, right? They'll say, hey, okay, well, you submitted 7,201 pieces of like web pages, but I only think that 1,500 are like indexable. So I'm just going to index those. So those things kind of are relevant. And when you're building out your sitemap, you want to make sure that the URLs in your sitemap are unique, right? You don't want to repeat your homepage over and over again. You also want to make sure that each URL in your sitemap returns a status code 200, which in server language basically means this is all good, nothing's wrong with it. You also want to make sure that they aren't link canonical, which is basically a fancy way of saying that this page is the same as another page. And then you want to make sure that all of the pages that like are no indexed on the page or in robots.txt aren't included in the sitemap. So robots.txt, this is something that lives on your root domain, and it's pretty straightforward. You basically can tell Googlebot or all of the bots that aren't malicious what is allowed and what is not allowed for them to crawl. So if you have some proprietary stuff, or maybe it's a user login page, you can say like disallow/login. And yeah, allowing JavaScript and CSS, I would recommend that, and disallowing, the checkout page or whatever, like do those sorts of things. Also, if you're using fancy JavaScript, Angular or React, make sure that Googlebot is seeing it correctly. So in the Search Console, under the crawl section on the left, there's a tool called Fetch as Google, and you can see how Googlebot is rendering your page. A lot of pages that are rendered with AngularJS or React, if they're on the client side, you're not actually showing Googlebot any content. Generally speaking, the fixes are to either render the JavaScript on the server side, or to, like make everything just static if it makes sense. So when you're fetching as Google, there's also an ability that you have to update, like to make Googlebot crawl your page. So going back to this thing, there's a submit to index in the top right, and you can click that, and basically you can force Google to go back to that page and crawl it. And that's important if, say, you have a very important page like your home page, and you just did a redesign. The Google kind of crawls pages as it feels like crawling them, and using this forces Google to re-crawl that page and then index it. So you don't have to wait for Googlebot to just kind of come by and crawl the page if it's a very important page that you've made modifications to. Google My Business, this is important because it shows up in the search engine results page on the right-hand side. It's pretty easy to just sign up and register. They usually will send you a postcard, and in that postcard, you're gonna get like an auth code just to make sure that you're actually at the address that you claim that you're at. So this is a query for 42 floors. Google My Business basically makes it so that that right-hand side kind of shows up. It's not all Google My Business, but certainly the phone numbers, the hours open, the address are all part of that. And you also can get reviews. It just adds a lot of credibility to your business in the search engine results page. So getting reviews is better than no reviews. You can review it yourself, get your friends, your family, get other people in GIMME growth. Like you can just trade reviews. That's what I would do just to build out the initial credibility. So Bing Webmaster Tools, this one is slightly more advanced because it gives you a crap ton of things like your crawl information, page mobile friendliness, all of these like different reports. So it's better tooling for errors and reporting than Google. So that's why I recommend checking it out. So moving forward, you want to back all of your SEO-driven decisions by keyword research, right? How are people searching for keywords that you're interested in targeting? And how many people are searching for them? So understanding keywords is the foundation of SEO, right? Generally speaking, the ways that you would want to get keyword opportunities is by brainstorming keywords, doing analysis on what kind of traffic you're already getting, and then doing competitive analysis on looking at people that you want to like beat in the search engine results page. Also, Google Auto Suggest is a great way, and AdWords Keyword Planner often gives suggestions. So let's dive into each one. Brainstorming is, this one's pretty straightforward. Create a list of keywords that you'd like to target, right? You know your industry and you know your product or service. Write down what you think you want to rank for. current search traffic, right? If you've set up your search console correctly, you can get a list of the keywords that you're already ranking for, right? So in this example, my friend and I built a cake pricing calculator, and we rank for all of these things that Search Console tells us. So we can get a list of ideas of, oh, maybe we can do this better, or wow, we didn't know that we're actually ranking for how to price baked goods. Like, oh, that's interesting. How can we improve that? Competitive analysis, this is SEMrush. So you can go to SEMrush and then you can type in, like your competitor's domain, and it will give you like a bunch of keywords that your competitors are ranking for. That's important for you to figure out, what they're ranking for that you're not. Auto suggest. This is what happens when you type in, like Google auto, whatever, like in the search bar, Google tries to autocomplete your phrase by what's most popular. So there's a free tool. It's called Uber Suggest. And basically it tells you if you typed in your keyword or a seed keyword, what the keyword plus like a number or a letter is. So it goes like cake A. Well, the auto suggest completes to art, away, and bake. And then you can pop those in to get the monthly search volume, which is on the right. AdWords Keyword Planner. You take now all of these like lists of brainstorming, competitive analysis, current search traffic, auto suggest, and you put them all into the keyword planner to get a monthly search volume for the keywords that you're thinking about targeting, right? And this is important because it's basically ranking all of your keywords by like a size of prize. I know that if I can rank for cake, that would be worth, like 301,000 monthly searches. And that's much better than maybe something less. But at the same time, right, like it's important to take into consideration intent and relevance. So what do I mean by intent and relevance? If I'm ranking for just cake, like the informational query, like that's probably not very relevant to like actually driving a ton of business, right? If I'm selling like say cake decorating supplies, it would be much better to rank for cake decorating supplies than it is, and like individual supplies, than it would be to actually rank for the keyword cake. So separating kind of this list of keywords that you've generated through, all of the methods we talked about, and then breaking them out by intent gets you like, oh, okay, well, if I'm targeting supplies, like cake flour, cake mix, like how does each kind of topic perform from a monthly search perspective? And how relevant is that for my business? Moving on, on-site content considerations. So these are the factors that you have control over that you can signal to Google about SEO. And the most important things are kind of like softer metrics, right? Like searcher intent and content relevance, and kind of this notion of user engagement metrics, right? Like if someone comes to your website on a query like San Francisco food delivery and you only have one restaurant, chances are they're going to bounce and they're not going to stay very long on your website. So that's bad, and you're not going to perform as well in Google. So making sure that your content and the keyword align is very important, right? This screenshot is what shows up when I Google how to play guitar, right? We can see that in this kind of example, it's all about like video and kind of like free guitar lessons. And if you wanted to target how to play guitar and you wrote like, some written content, it's probably not going to rank because Google is already figured out that people who are searching for how to play guitar, they're best served by content that are guitar lessons and videos, right? So really figuring out what's already ranking in the search engine results page is pretty critical to designing content that will rank. This is another example, right? San Francisco food delivery. And you can see number 1 is Grubhub, number 2 is Seamless, number 3, Caviar, number 4 is Eat24. And the importance that I want to hammer home is relevance makes all of the difference. So this is Grubhub, right? You can see that there's a search bar of your address and then a bunch of listings and of restaurants and different categories, right? Number 2 is Seamless. Again, enter your address and a whole list of restaurants, how much they cost, what the delivery fee is, how long you're going to wait, and what they're selling. Number 3, Caviar, right? There is also this list of what's delivering and a search of categories and whatever. Number 4, Eat24, also enter your address, except this one's slightly different, right? There's browse by neighborhood, but it still includes the most popular categories, right? So if you're targeting food delivery, it's very likely that you need a bunch of restaurants by sorted by neighborhood, sorted by popular categories. And if you intend to rank a page that doesn't have a bunch of restaurants that deliver, then it's probably not going to happen. Again, right? Google the keyword that you want to rank and see what Google is already showing. So this is a query for freight forwarder. As you can see, I've bucketed out to the right. The first result is Wikipedia, and it's informational. The second result, also informational. What does a freight forwarder do, right? And then number 3 and number 6 are directories of businesses, right? Freight forwarding companies in San Francisco. And number 6, directory of freight forwarding services. And then number 4 and 5 are also informational, right? What is freight forwarder? And number 4 is okay, that actually mentions a business. So if I were thinking about ranking freight forwarder, given that this is the top 6 results, I'm going to be creating a piece of content that's what is a freight forwarder? What does it do? How to hire one? How do you figure out, what the good cookies are from the bad cookies? Here's a list of the top freight forwarders in San Francisco so that I'm hitting the informational relevance. I'm also hitting the directory thing that Google is already showing in the SERPs. User engagement metrics, people who stay on your site longer than your competitor sites, it's good, right? Google is taking these things into consideration, and this concept is basically called dwell time. Ways to increase user engagement metrics, right? People have been adding a lot of hero images. You can add a video. Khan Academy does that very well. Having well-formatted, readable text is good. I don't really necessarily think any specific one of these things that I mentioned are magic bullets, right? I think it really depends on what you're trying to rank for, what industry you're in, and what's already working. So I don't want to say, okay, always add a hero image. It's if you're in the restaurant business, you better have reviews and photos, because that's what Yelp has. If you don't, you're probably not going to rank. So just another example for hiking gear, the top 3 results, there's big, gorgeous hero images for each one. This is REI, this is backcountry, and this, I don't have Amazon, but Amazon would also have that thing. And it's not by accident that these types of content are ranking, right? Like Google is finding that users are more pleased, they're more positively engaged with these sorts of landing page experiences when it comes specifically to hiking gear. So copy the types of content that are already ranking in the SERPs, right? Google has mostly figured out that the searcher intent to the content. If you're doing how to surf, videos make sense, right? Google what you're trying to rank for and see what's already working. So yeah, this is the Amazon picture that I was mentioning. But like I said, all these like hero images are all being used. So top on-site technical considerations. It's my belief that technical SEO is becoming much less relevant because Google is getting much smarter about how to crawl websites, you know, how it all works together. So you don't have to worry too much that, you know, you don't have an H2 or, you know, this button is too small. But there are still five factors that I think are really relevant from a technical consideration, right? Crawlability, title tags, meta descriptions, internal linking, and mobile friendliness. So how you can identify that you have these on-site technical issues, you can crawl your website. I would recommend Screaming Frog SEO Spider. It's free, I think up to 500 URLs. And you can use Search Console. It'll tell you what your HTML improvements are, the internal links, the server errors. And then for mobile friendliness and site load speed, Google has tools that you can just pop your URL in, and they're linked below. So you can check them out on your own time. This is Screaming Frog. I crawled, you know, a friend's website, Palbox, and it can tell you, oh, these are the page titles, these are the meta descriptions, and these are the ones that are duplicate, over 65 characters, you know, below 30 characters. That's kind of how you can identify on-site technical factors. And also from Search Console in search appearance, it'll tell you HTML improvements, right? Like you have these duplicate meta descriptions, you're missing a title tag, this is too long, this is too short. So again, these two are the way that I would recommend. So crawlability, this is the same screenshot as before. If a Google bot cannot crawl it or see it, then you know you don't have any chance of like ranking, right? So fetch your content that you think could be questionable and see how Google is viewing your content. Title tags, why are they important? They basically are like the call out to your content in the search engine results page, right? Like when you write a title tag, is Gmail HIPAA compliant? Like that's what ends up showing up in the search engines. You know, how to make your title tags, like make sure that they're there, make them unique and interesting, greater than 30 characters, less than 65 characters, make sure that they're relevant to what your content is, and you know, don't infringe on trademarks because that could make Google just like take your, like swap out what you intended it to be. So here's a pro tip on title tags. I, at 42 Floors, used AdWords to quantify like my title tags, right? So here's an example of two different ads. One of them says, you know, like affordable and flexible office leases, 2,000 plus office rentals. And that performed 50% better than seeing real photos of listings, right? So it's more clear that the messaging of affordable and flexible office leases was resonating with, you know, the people who were searching for office space on Google. So A/B testing those title tags in AdWords gets you an objective way of figuring out oh, this is going to yield a much higher click-through rate. Why meta descriptions? These are the things that come up below the title tags in the SERPs. They're used as suggestions for the snippets in the SERPs. So you can see here, not here, let me see, yeah, here, that missing meta descriptions is not a problem for Google, because Google is smart enough to just take a look at all of your content and see what makes sense for the user. Going back, right, like Wikipedia does not have meta descriptions. They just don't have the tag in at all. So basically, when I'm thinking about meta descriptions, make them unique and interesting, make them less than 160 characters, and make them relevant to the content. But it's not a ranking factor, right? Google is going to look at your content and figure out on its own ability what it feels like displaying as your description. Internal linking are this is important because it's a lot like internal votes to important content on your website, right? If you have a homepage and you're linking to your category pages and your blog, it's basically like pointing to, okay, well, my homepage, people's homepages are typically linked the most because it's always in the nav bar in the top left. And you basically get kind of this sort of hierarchy, right? If you have a page that only has one internal link pointing to it, then Google interprets that as not as important as, a page that gets 93 or your most linked to page, which is the home page. So kind of making sure that your most important pages are being targeted by internal links correctly is important. So how to do internal linking correctly? Make sure all of your pages are internally linked. We want to do this because we want to make all of your pages discoverable to the Google bot. If Google can't find a way to crawl it, there's no crawl path to that page, then how is it going to index it? And then how is that page then going to show up in the SERPs? Also, make sure your most important pages get more internal links and special contextual links. So homepage links are going to be more valuable than footer links because Google recognizes that you only have one homepage, and if you're choosing on that homepage to point to a specific page, like a call out or a call to action, then that page must be very important. So taking all of those things into consideration is pretty important from an internal linking standpoint. Pro tip, nav bars are above the fold and they also reside on your homepage, and you can use those to target important pages on your website. So again, friend's website, Palbox, is very important. They rank for HIPAA compliant email. So they just put it in the header. And as a result, it is one of the most linked to pages on their website, and it ranks reasonably well for that keyword. Another pro tip, right, this is also with nav bars, this is what TripAdvisor does, is that it puts in the more competitive keywords that they want to rank for, like Miami hotels, Las Vegas hotels, South Lake Tahoe hotels, in their dropdown, because they want to allocate more link juice to those kinds of pages. Another pro tip, this is Retail Me Not. This is a user sitemap, right? So it's a way for Google to basically crawl all of its categories from one page. So these user sitemaps are easy ways to get full internal linking coverage. Why mobile friendliness? Mobile friendliness is important because Google has a separate index for mobile queries and desktop queries. If you're not mobile friendly, you're not going to rank well for mobile search, right? This, I think in 2015, there was this thing called Mobilegeddon, which basically meant that Google was taking into consideration mobile friendliness, right? server response times, how quickly your page loads, because mobile users are typically on LTE, 4G, 3G. Speed load is important. And then kind of like, is the page responsive? If it's not responsive, like we're going to kind of demote that in the mobile index. It's pretty easy to figure out whether or not your site is mobile friendly. Basically, you just put it into the mobile friendly testing tool and it will tell you, yes, like you're good, or no, this is why you're not good. Off-site SEO hacks. These are links and citations and more links. A SEO presentation would not be like comprehensive if it didn't talk about links. So in the past, like this is how like one might do black hat links. Like you buy a bunch of tier 1 links, and then tier 2 links are like shittier things where people would spam like blog comments and whatever. So the thing about links is like it's very hard to kind of gather them like white hat. But the reason why they're important is because backlinks are external votes to your website or your web page, right? And that's kind of like saying if the New York Times writes about your website, then yeah, it's like they're saying this is a link-worthy and notable website because I am linking to it. People should go to this website. The same thing happens for citations. Citations are relevant for local businesses. Citations basically mean if you're listed in, Yelp and Foursquare and the Yahoo small business directory, then Google has more confidence that, oh, you are actually a local business, in San Francisco doing, chiropractic or something like that. So citations are more relevant for local SEO, and backlinks, of course, are relevant for just general SEO. So how do you do backlinks? Generally speaking, you do like PR. You can get citations easily by listing your company in Foursquare, Yelp. You outreach to bloggers that are in your industry. You do guest blogging by trading a blog post with another blog post. You can sponsor content on, BuzzFeed or Business Insider, and you do like kind of like creative endeavors, or you ask everyone else in GIMME Growth, right? You say, hey, well, you write a blog post about my business, I'll write a blog post about yours. That would be pretty easy, like as a way of getting like your initial backlink like profile built out. So PR, right? You generally hustle journalists and you do new and noteworthy things. WePay is a company in San Francisco, and they literally like dropped a block of ice that had like a ton of $5 bills in it in front of like Moscone Center where PayPal was having a conference. And they're saying like PayPal freezes your accounts, like we don't. And that generated a huge amount of like press for them. And as a result, backlinks, which helped them, kind of build out their backlink profile. Citations, I'd say the easiest way to get citations is by using like moz.com/local. They have this thing where it submits it, like you enter in your local business information and it submits it to like a bunch of small business directories that it's already partnered with. So you can just enter in your thing, they push it out to all these data aggregators, and it works well for local businesses. And it's pretty cheap, I think like less than $100 a year. Bloggers, right? You create a list of bloggers in your industry that possibly talk about, things relating to your product, and you literally cold outreach to them. For the most part, like besides PR, this is the type of activity that link building like SEO agencies are focusing on, right? Whether or not they have VAs in America doing it or like a data team in the Philippines, like everyone is basically scraping like resource articles, or, like 7 steps to blah articles, and then cold outreaching to like the webmaster saying, hey, I came across your blog post and I think that our tool should belong in that article. It's not the most glorious thing, but it is very commonly done. Like a lot of companies are engaging in this, whether through an agency or actually having internal teams like doing link building like this. Guest blogging, right? You can also hustle bloggers in your industry and say, hey, you write about me and I will write about you. So this is a guest blog post on Andrew Chen's blog. It happens pretty frequently. Another way of getting backlinks, like sometimes you reach out to like bloggers or other media sites and you're saying, hey, so, I'd like a link. And they go, okay, well, I charge, $700 for the average post, and, you get this, and a link, right? And you can maybe negotiate with them and say, well, I don't want a giveaway or a promotion. I just want the link, and you write the content. I will pay you $100 or $200. A lot of bloggers or media websites will, when you ask for a link, like charge you some money. And then the last one is creative endeavors, right? So for every industry and for every product and every service, like think about how you can leverage something that others can't. So Mixpanel had this whole badge thing where it's like, hey, well, you get 25,000 trigger events normally, but if you become a Mixpanel partner and take this like piece of code that we have and put it in your footer, then we're going to add 200,000 more like trigger events for your free account. So tons of people are like, yeah, I'm going to do that. But like little do they know that like in that little piece of code that you're adding to your website, it says like mobile analytics dash Mixpanel, and it's like linking back to Mixpanel. So they're just building a crap ton of links on, like all kinds of different websites, like essentially for free. Like they're giving away 200,000 more data points, which is more server processing power. But, like that's how they're doing it. Right now, like they've scaled that back. Their Mixpanel partner badges are no followed because they kind of got slapped on their wrist by Google. People realized that they were gaming the backlinks by doing this. And so, like I wouldn't worry too much about, say, getting slapped on the wrist by Google if it's white hat sort of things, because you'd rather like rank than, just not rank at all. But think about how you can do or leverage things that other people in your industry or offering a similar product or service can't do. And that's it. So if you want more like programmatic, like if you want more about SEO, I've done a presentation about programmatic SEO. I'm sure Dom can distribute the presentation to you guys, but I'm open for any questions.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. I guess while we're on that topic, do you want to explain a little bit more in your words as to what programmatic SEO is versus what you were really just talking about during this presentation?
So programmatic SEO, like can, generally speaking, when thinking about SEO, there's two main types of SEO. There's long form editorial content, basically what NerdWallet and Wirecutter are doing, right? Generally speaking, content marketing, writing like 1,000 to 10,000 word articles and getting those pieces of like content ranked in Google. And then the other kind of SEO is programmatic SEO. And that's what TripAdvisor and Yelp are doing, right? They have a ton of data in a database that's tagged with all of this metadata, right? Like lunch, good for lunch, has drinks, vegan, delivery, all these like tags. And then they create millions of landing pages based on all kinds of like like data, right? They can go, okay, well, we can create a San Francisco lunch page. Also, we can create a San Francisco dinner page, but also sandwich page. And, you know, we can also narrow it down to a specific neighborhood, like the financial district, and then sandwiches there. So it's basically more driven by code and data than it is, say, a writer creating a piece of content that is like 10,000 words long.
Okay, perfect. And then are there penalties associated with creating all these different types of pages? Because somebody might be tempted to, hearing that, just think that, oh, it's volume of pages, but it's not volume of pages, because it's really like the sandwich page is so relevant, right?
Yeah.
It's all about high quality. So what are some of the penalties or things to kind of like avoid or be careful of?
So that's a great kind of point. Like lots of companies in the past have gotten a little greedy, right, with the programmatic approach. And they realize, well, hey, you know, like I can just change like the code, spin up millions of pages that say, you know, like San Francisco plumber, Dallas plumber, New York City plumber. And then all it does is just swap out like keywords on the page and offers like no significant value. So kind of around, I'd say 3-4 years ago, Google caught on that webmasters were doing this. So they rolled out an algorithm called Panda, which basically penalized websites that had really low quality content, right? They would look at the piece of content and they would say, oh, well, there's no significant or unique data or content on this page. So as a result, I'm going to drag the entire value of your website down. So a lot of times webmasters don't even know that they're getting penalized by Google because they have all these millions of pages that exist and they think, oh, well, I'm having this because I want to get search traffic. But to basically identify that you have that sort of problem, then we basically need to be looking more at like your indexation rate. Like, so in your sitemaps, if you're submitting 7,000 web pages and only 1,200 are being indexed, that's an indication of poor content quality. Also, another way to figure out that you might have this problem is that you say you have like 1 million pages and you're like, I created these pages because I want them to get search traffic. And you know, you look at your Google Analytics or your Search Console and you realize that only 5% or 10%, right, like 50,000 to 100,000 of the million pages are actually getting any kind of organic traffic, then you're probably getting penalized, right? Because 90 to 95% of your website that you've created for SEO purposes isn't actually generating SEO. So common ways to fix this is by scaling back that greed, you know, like pruning away web pages that you created for SEO that are not ranking, or consolidating pieces of content. But generally speaking, it's around a like algorithmic removal of pages based on like content limits. Basically, that's what Zillow, Trulia, Yelp do. They realize, okay, well, we can't create a page that doesn't have any restaurant listings or doesn't have any like homes or apartments for sale. So if we don't have the data for, you know, townhomes in Tucson, Arizona, then like don't create the page. But if at some point we get a data source that has that much like that data that can fill out, you know, greater than 5 listings, then automatically spin that page up. And that's how people are thinking about, you know, not being punished by thin or, you know, really like not useful content.
Okay, perfect. And then, so that's useful to think about. And then it's oftentimes it's very hard to make content as a startup because sometimes you don't know where to start. And we're going to have a whole other section specifically about content. But you mentioned something at breakfast this morning. Can you just talk a little bit about what the first steps you take are to actually, start building content?
Yeah. So, generally speaking, like a lot of startups or companies are outsourcing writing to somewhere in America, or like sometimes out to like India or the Philippines. Generally speaking, people are paying anywhere between, 10 cents a word to $1 a word. So keeping that as a general rule of thumb when, you're hiring writers or content marketers, I think is important. And also, so I would say like $20 to $500 is a range for, a 200 to 1,000 word piece of content.
Okay.
And making sure that you've done your keyword research before hiring your writer. If the purpose of you getting content created is for SEO, is like extremely important, right? You're not going to hire a content writer and say, well, we're in the email marketing SaaS like business, just write whatever you think you should write about. It's like, no, you want to give them a very well structured, this is the topic, these are the subheaders, right? Like email marketing is like how to do email marketing. And then like, these are the 7 subheaders, right? Like designing your first campaign, choosing a provider, things to consider about subject lines, those things.
Perfect. Okay. And then I think lastly, one of the other talking points that we wanted to talk about was, subdomain versus directory. I know that we talked about that. Like that's more of a technical SEO thing. Would you touch base on that for a second?
Yeah. So commonly, like in the past and still now, there's like this hot debate about, if you have blog.yourwebsite.com versus yourwebsite.com/blog, right? So if it's a blog.yourwebsite.com, that is considered a subdomain because it's, like a sub part of like your domain. And then if /blog is part of your thing, like bit.ly/programmatic SEO, that's like a directory. So in the past, like having your blog on a subdirectory, so yourwebsite.com/blog, was a lot more valuable because Google kind of aggregated each domain as its own. So if you created blog.yourwebsite.com and then put your content on there, basically the value of your domain authority would not pass to the subdomain. The reason why this existed is because, on Tumblr or on Blogger or WordPress.com, you could create, paydayloans.wordpress.com or weightlosspills.tumblr.com, and it would not make any sense for Tumblr's, really high domain authority to pass any sort of link juice to the subdomain because that would be terrible. So everyone would always put their blog on like the directory for SEO reasons. Also, technically speaking, like if you're running a Ruby on Rails app or some sort of like, Django, and you want to use WordPress as your like blogging, like it's just kind of a pain in the ass to have to proxy like /blog over to a WordPress like installation.
Yep.
But that's to say that Google has come out and publicly stated that there is no difference now between /blog and blog. They basically say, okay, well, we're smart enough to figure out to cluster web properties together, right? So in the Zillow, Trulia, Hotpad, StreetEasy empire, they look at Zillow, Trulia, StreetEasy, and Hotpads as one entity that all gets links and that sort of thing, not as 4 separate entities, because they know in theory that all of these properties belong to the same organization. So Google has publicly stated that, but privately speaking, like people have been doing their own tests, and I think it's still questionable whether or not like it holds true. So in an ideal world, you're still putting all of your like assets on a directory, so /blog rather than blog dot.
Okay. Perfect. Well, as always, this is a very thorough, fantastic presentation. I really, really appreciate it. And
Yeah, man.
If anybody has questions, they can just add them directly into the comment stream, and I'll make sure to get them answered.
Great.
Perfect. Well,
all right.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Later.